Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Bree. Today's video, we're going to be talking about all the books I read in the month of April. I have a little bit of a stack here for you, along with some books I don't own physically to talk through. I would say like probably the lowest amount of books read in the in the year so far, but I do feel like I read things I had been wanting to get to, and I was excited about some reading vlogs. So in that case, I think it was a win. I do have two books that I'm going to talk to you about that are going to come out in a reading vlog later, so I won't go too in depth in here about my thoughts because they haven't come out yet. So I'll end up just giving you my rating and just if I liked it or not, and then you can check out my reading vlog later if you want to know more in-depth thoughts on those. Now, let me just start by talking about the two I don't own, because if I don't talk about them first, I will forget about them. So the first I read is called Shan Len, and that is by Darcy Littlebadger. That is already out. It just came out in April. I think the 16th was the release date, and I read it for a reading vlog where I was reading Spring Vibe books. It was the first book I read, and I had an arc of it from NetGalley, and this is, like I said, a prequel to Alatsway. So I read Alatsway last year and really loved it, gave that book 5 stars. So I wanted to pick up the sequel, or the prequel, which is following Alatsway's grandmother, Shane, and her life as she goes with her mom to track for missing people. They go into the woods and stuff and try to find people who've gone missing. This can be hikers or just a kid who's wandered off, those kind of things. And one day her mom is trying to track down these 2 kids that went missing, and her mom ends up going missing as well. And so Shane takes it on herself to try to figure out what happened to them. And it deals a lot with the magic system that was established in Alatsway, though I think it focuses on different things. So in Alatsway, we get a lot of general world building, and we focus a lot on Alatsway's magic and things like that, where the focus on this is more in a different direction. I don't really want to say, I don't think it's spoilers, but I think it was interesting to find out for yourself. So that one I really enjoyed. I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. I think I didn't love it as much as Alatsway. It was a little bit slower pace, which I think for the story it was trying to tell, it did it really well. It was unpacking a lot about grief and also about the Lip and Apache people and Shane's specific family, what she had to go through in her childhood. So we're unpacking a lot of that and the treatment they received post this event that occurs. I think all of that was weaved together really well, and I really enjoyed seeing Shane's journey, because it's kind of like a coming of age story, and seeing Shane try to work through all these unresolved feelings I thought was really good. But I just think it was a bit slow for my personal taste, and I wanted more of a mystery from it, like I got with Alatsway, though Alatsway wasn't your typical mystery either. Sorry for this lighting. The sun just went away. Overall, I really like it. I think that Darcy Littlebadger really has a way of world building and sucking you in and making you feel like you know the characters right away, and the characters are just great characters to follow, and I'm really glad this kind of book is out there for young readers. So I really liked it. 4 stars from me. Then I finished on audiobook Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the second and final book in the, I think it's called Letters of Enchantment duology. I read Divine Rivals in December last year, or maybe it was early January. I can't remember now. And I enjoyed it. I think it was last year. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. I think it was one of those books where I wanted more fantasy from it, and I was hoping the second book, based on how it left off, was going to give more fantasy. And I will say it's pretty much the same to the first one. Yes, we deal more closely with some of the magic elements that are talked about in the first one because of how it leaves off, but at the same time, it still really felt like a historical kind of war story. I think that if you go in being a fantasy reader who really loves magic systems, this book doesn't really give you the magic you're hoping for, versus if you are really okay with soft magic systems. I think that this could do it for you, but for me, as someone who wanted a lot of magic, it just didn't give that. And after reading the second one, I kind of could have just never read it and would have felt fine. I wanted to close it out to really understand what happens, but after knowing the end, I feel like I could have never read it and felt just as satisfied. I don't feel more satisfied for knowing the ending, because personally I didn't think it did anything that much more spectacular than the first one. Like, the vibes of the first one are definitely, if you liked that one, you're getting the same thing in the second one, is what I kind of feel about it. I still think the characters were cool, and I liked them. I liked following them. It was just a okay experience where I think that in a year or two I might forget that I ever read it. So I think I'm gonna go with 3 stars on this one. The writing is beautiful. The imagery is beautiful. The way that we talk like through letters and like that kind of stuff is really beautiful. And I think there are like lines that Rebecca Ross writes that really stick out. But overall, for the plot, it just was lacking for me, and it was lacking too much where I don't think that the characters were like making me love it despite having a slower plot. And then again, like I said, the fantasy elements just weren't there. So that's why it's a 3 from me. But I'm glad I have a series checked off my list, and I'm glad I gave it a go and just learned that that kind of fantasy is not necessarily my thing. Next, I have a book that I didn't read for any kind of reading vlog. I just read it because I wanted to. And that's A Dangerous Collaboration by DeRaber, and this is the 4th in the Veronica Speedwell series. This one I think is my favorite one so far. I think I'm gonna go with a 4.5. I think I originally was gonna give it a 4, but the more I've been sitting on it, the more I think it's 4.5. This one is just like the most with the romance that we've gotten so far. So I think the biggest part of this for me was the romance side, because I think we've come to a point where the tension's so high that like something had to happen, and I really loved that. I think that this book specifically handled it in a way that I really, really enjoyed the tension and the build up to it. And I think that for all their like bickering and everything, I actually really loved the like closeness and the way that they handled like their relationship in this one. And the mystery itself was interesting. We get somewhat of Stoker's brother's backstory because they visit like a childhood friend, and I thought that was interesting. The mystery, again, is always kind of the weakest element to me, but in this case, I thought that it was relatively interesting, and I was just so here for Veronica and Stoker. Oh, hi, Pippi. I was very here for them getting together and like seeing where that like romantic tension was going. And they go to like a remote place, so they're actually at a house, and so that like setting and everything I think really set the mood for this. So overall, I think I'm gonna go with a 4.5. It just has really good historical mystery romance vibes. So if you're into it, I think the series is growing on me the more and more I read it. So if you didn't love the first book like I didn't, and you kind of want to see if you like it, maybe give it another book or two, because I didn't really love the first one. I wanted to love it, but there were some things I didn't love, and I continued, and now I found myself really, really enjoying the series. So that is A Dangerous Collaboration. Can I put this here? Is that okay? I'm just pulling whatever's off the stack, by the way. I'm not going in any particular order. I didn't feel like it today. So this is what we're getting. This one that I'm about to show you is for a reading vlog, so I won't go too much into it, but that's They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. I'm on like a 3.5 to 4 star on this one. I enjoyed it, but I think there are things I didn't love about it. So you can see that in a video coming up soon. This will probably be the second video out because I haven't made as much progress in that video as the other video. Sorry, I'm being vague, but I want to keep it, you know, exciting. So yeah, you'll see my thoughts soon-ish on this. I can at least tell you what it's about. So it's a thriller that is kind of like a good for her thriller, where there's a serial killer that you're in the head of, and she kills men who do bad things to young women, and she's on a college campus, and slowly like the police and stuff are looking into these apparent suicides on campus that probably aren't, not all of them are. And so we see like her story, and then we follow another character who's a young girl who's in college for the first time, and she is just going through life, and you're just seeing her story and how everything's going to fit together. And yeah, that's They Never Learn. You will see in a video coming up soon about it. I lied. I actually have 3 books in total that I'm not going to talk about. So let me just get those out of the way. So the next one is The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. This is a Frankenstein retelling that we're following Elizabeth Lavenza, who is the wife-to-be of Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, and it's her story following like the events of Frankenstein. This one I gave a 4 stars to. I really enjoyed. And you're going to see a theme probably. This is Our Hideous Progeny by C.E. McGill. This is another Frankenstein retelling. It's kind of a gothic story. I originally thought horror, but it's more of a historical suspense type story, and we're following Mary, and this is years after the original Frankenstein. We're following a descendant of Victor Frankenstein as she finds which is her uncle. She finds his journals, and she and her husband decide to try to recreate what Frankenstein was up to. And yeah, this one I actually neglected to rate because I'm just still unsure about a rating. I have mixed feelings, so you can see more of that in the vlog that should come out first, but that's Our Hideous Progeny. And then the rest are all in a reading vlog that I read the spring books in. So let's talk about, I had 4, so 2 I didn't love and 2 I loved, so I'm going to mix them up. So starting with one I didn't love, that is The Fairy Bargains of Prospect Hill by Rowena Miller. This is a historical fiction fantasy, but I am learning with these kind of books that there is some historical fantasy that doesn't get fantasy enough, and I feel like this is one of them. We're following a family who made bargains with the Fae, and they are now struggling, and we're following 2 different sisters as they are going about their own lives, and they start to interact with the Fae in certain ways. So we have one of the sisters who is running the farm, and the farm is like basically about to go under, and so she's making more and more bargains with the Fae. And then we follow her younger sister who's getting married to this well-off man in the town who runs like the steel or glass mill that his family owns, and we follow both of them as things are just going downhill, and you see them make more and more bargains and get deeper into the stuff that's going on. This one, I just found one that I don't love light fantasy. When there's only a sprinkle of it, like I wanted more magic, and you do get some towards the end, but overall I found this just boring, and a lot of it I just wanted to skim, and I ended up like putting on the audiobook for like faster than I usually do just to get through it because I just did not care, and that's really sad because I thought the premise sounded so good. But overall I think it's going to be about a 2-star for me. Then one I loved is Una Out of Order by Margarita Montemore. This is a time travel-y book. It's a like literary fiction, contemporary fiction. I still don't really know how you like differentiate the two, literary versus contemporary, but we're basically following Una as she turns 19 on the new year is her birthday, and when she turns 19 she's actually flung into, I forget, like she's in like her 50s, so she's flung into the year, she starts in 1982 and she's put into like 2015. This is hard to explain, but she doesn't live her life in a linear order. She kind of skips around from years, but mentally she's still the same age. So she goes like mentally 19, 20, 21, 22, but she doesn't live her life in that order. So sometimes she's an older woman, sometimes she's back in her 20s, sometimes she might be in her 30s. And she has to piece together the pieces of her life, and it's just a lot about life and connection with other people and how you want to live your life. Like, can you change the future? Can you change the past? Those kind of questions, all things that I think are typically discussed in time travel books, is discussed in here, but I thought the way it was told was so unique, and it really had a lot of things that made me think, and a lot of like situations that happened to her that really made me like wonder what I would do in this kind of situation. And yeah, it's really not my typical story. I don't really typically read a ton of like contemporary or literary fiction, but the thing that grabbed me was the time travel elements, and I think overall it was really well done. I would highly recommend it, and I gave it 5 stars. Then one I didn't like was Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung, and this is translated from Korean by Anthony Here, and this one is sad to me because I picked it up thinking I was going to love it because I've heard such good things, but I think in the end it's about a 3-star for me. There are like a lot of stories in here that are just grotesque. Like this gets really gross, especially like the first story. If you pick up the first story and you read it and you think that's not for me, like they're all kind of like that. Though I think that one was kind of the grossest one in my opinion. But it's a lot of short stories that we just are supposed to be tackling like themes about life and technology and capitalism and patriarchy, but I think like a lot of the meaning of each story was lost on me. We got to do a lot of endings of stories and I didn't fully get it, and it just felt gross, and like I don't know, I just didn't understand a lot of it. And partly it could be just me like not being smart enough to get it, but the other part of me was just like thinking that I think I don't connect to these kind of short horror stories. I don't know. I can't explain why it didn't work for me really well. I feel like I had better thoughts in the reading vlog than I do now. But overall, I think I would give it like a 3-star. It just wasn't my thing, but I can see why some people might like it, but it wasn't for me. I don't do a lot of like grotesque, gross horror. And if it's sprinkled in there, like there has to be other things that I love about it. And this just was more grotesque without having like the payoff, I think, of understanding the stories. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Cursed Bunny. And then finally, we have a last 5-star, and that's Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This is a horror novella, though I would say it's kind of like suspense-y. Like, it gets a bit horror-y at the end, but for the most part, you're just following this woman as she's moved to a new town, and she becomes infatuated with this woman at the farmer's market stall. And you're kind of also following our main character, what was her name? Rosemary, and it's her first time like ever realizing that she is into women, and so you're following kind of this exploration of her sexuality. And yeah, it gets weird, and it kind of does kind of what you would expect it to do, but at the same time I found it so like interesting and shocking by the end, and I felt like the end was wild. Even though I like kind of knew what was coming, it still managed to like horrify me. So yeah, I think it did everything it was setting out to do, and I thought it was well done, and I just had a really great time reading it. I read it in one day. It was one of those books that just was kind of what I needed at that time, and I think it was a perfect like spring horror book. So really glad I read it for that reading vlog, and glad I picked it up, because when I had heard it mentioned before, I thought this was going to be a book for me, and it really delivers. I don't think it's going to work for everyone. I think that for some it's maybe not going to go horror enough, and for others it might be too on the nose, but I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I'm giving it 5 stars. Alright. Those are all the books I read in the month of April. A little less than my normal amount, but I think I had some good ones in there. And I can't wait for you to see the rest of the reading vlogs to come out. If you've stayed to the end of the video and you just don't normally leave comments, I know I am not a big commenter in general on other people's channels and stuff, because I get nervous because I'm an introvert. So if you're like that and you just want to let me know you were here, if you want to leave one of the heart emojis down below, I'd love it. And if you want to also leave just always whatever you've been reading in the month of April or recently, I'd love to hear it, because I love chatting books. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.